Good morning, everybody. It's book release day for me, and I promised I would read part of the book. This is the book, Unbroken. Whoops. It's the second in the series of the Rise of the Masks, and it picks up where the first one left off. I have a prologue if you haven't read the first one. But I'm going to skip it today. I'm just going to dig right into chapter 1. And I'll also be posting this broadcast on my YouTube channel when I'm all done, so you can see it later. So this is a fantasy book. It's set in a kind of a pre-industrialized world. Oh, and happy Halloween. So here we go, chapter 1, Unbroken. With the breeze on her face, Zuni stood on the red sand of her desert homeland, watching her childhood friend take aim and draw his spear back. Keeping silent, crouching downwind from the animal, she willed Denny's arrow to be true. She was the better shot. She'd always had a knack for knowing where the wind blew. But he was in a better position to take down the animal. Typical Denny, he liked to taunt her, to claim that he was the better marksman, although they both knew the truth. He could be annoying, but when they hunted together, the time passed quickly, occupied as she was by his verbal sparring. His spear flew with the whisper of a whip and struck the bony cobra in its narrow neck. The animal went down, dropping like a stone. An impressive strike, she acknowledged with a wry smile. Denny gave a triumphant shout and skidded down the sandy slope toward the carcass. She joined him an instant later. It was as dumb as that deadwood Lantis chalk, her father's old enemy, also half-starved, too weak to run away, she told him, her arms crossed. Her hip jutted out in a way that never failed to irritate him. Denny rolled his eyes, the night-dark centers standing out against the bright white surrounding them. Both of them were covered in a layer of fine red dust, from their bare shoulders to their sandaled feet. She could even see the sand on his eyelashes and eyebrows, silt standing out on his dark hair. Dust probably covered the top of his head as well, though he was too tall for her to see. "Half-starved like you bony thing," he said. Squatting by the animal's body, he took the rope where it looped over his shoulder and began to truss its legs together. The goat had very little flesh on it, she could tell already, but some meat was better than nothing. And the carcass was small enough that Denny would be able to sling it over his shoulders for the long walk home. As he squatted to tie it up, she saw that yes, his shorn head was covered with dust, which was good. The soot protected them from the sun, as well as allowed them to better blend into the rusty landscape while they searched for more prey. Zuni looked down at herself, at the short brownish-red zari wrap that covered her from chest to thighs, her long legs as slender as a deer's, ending in feet planted far apart. She was half-starved, her ribs standing out more than she'd ever seen them before in her life. But she thought she'd hidden it well. She gave a snort of derision. Denny, on the other hand, looked the same as always. Broad, brown shoulders that were so familiar to her, a comfort yet an annoyance at the same time. However, she had greater things to worry over, so she let her momentary pique pass without further bickering, though it was their favorite pastime, without a doubt hers. Many months ago, Zuni's older sister had disappeared. Rav had gone north to the land of the Green Mountains and the White Stone Fortress to spend the summer at a school. The journey to Sillery Keep was said to be long and arduous, many weeks in duration, and required passage by boat, which made Zuni shiver to think about. Rav was to have stayed at the keep for 3 months, then return at the end of their summer season. She promised Zuni that she would return. As next oldest sister, Zuni was now in charge of their household and all of its occupants. She didn't like the responsibility one bit, not even the smallest grain of it. The burden of taking care of other people chafed her usual carefree self, but she was stuck in this position until her sister returned. So far, Rav had not come back, even all these months later. With the herds of scrappy desert goats dwindling, and nothing to hunt near their sheltered cluster of tents between the red rock formations, Zuni had to travel farther and farther away for any fresh kill, even for meager game like the scrawny goat across Denny's shoulders. One emaciated cobra would not fill the bellies of her 10 younger sisters, but still, it was better than nothing and a reason to feel more optimistic than before. Maybe Lena could make a soup. They all knew Zuni was no cook. When at first the kitchen pot grew empty too fast, she blamed the shortage on the speed at which her sisters' appetites grew. Frustration mounted among them all. The youngest of her sisters was 5 years old, the eldest 16. Most of them were the traded gains from other families, brought home by their father, collected, valued, and even prized, most of them. She thought of Lena's sharp tongue and snorted. All right, all of them were treasured, even Lena. The girls were growing, as all creatures did, and required a lot of nourishment. Later, she blamed herself for not bringing home enough meat. Then she'd realize there wasn't any game to be found. The once plentiful herds had withered, dwindled, and vanished. Now the drawn looks on the little ones' faces made her chest tight with anxiety. She was failing them, not fit to be their leader, their caretaker, their mother. Following Denny's larger footsteps, Zuni scanned the wide-open desert beside them. They followed a sparse dotting of dead tree trunks that poked upward, like black thorns stabbing through the red ground. Neither of them hesitated to turn in the correct direction toward home. The row of blackened tree skeletons, a remnant of wetter seasons long past, marked their path. They'd explored almost this far away as children, but then it had been for fun. In the months since Rav left, what had once been a harsh and inhospitable land had become even more so, tenfold so. The once plentiful herds of cobra had vanished. With them had gone the carrion birds, the smaller parasitic birds, and even many of the insects that used to keep them in their cloaked tents at night to avoid being covered with bites. Weren't they all just parasites, she thought, feeding upon the backs of others? The drought, and Zuni no longer hesitated to call it that, was so extreme, even for a desert, that the neighboring families, local warlords who used to trouble them, now left them alone. Whether the other combative families were dead, gone, or dying within their own tents, Zuni didn't know. She knew only that none of them had attacked in recent times. Ashanti, Lohani, Chalk, not a single aggressive overture by any of them. So none of them knew how vulnerable she and her little sisters were, how their father had died at the end of the last season, leaving them unprotected. Thank the Great Mother none of them had attacked. Look, do you see that? What is that? Ahead of her, Denny had halted his steps and now was squinting toward the south, looking odd in the hot sun with his furred carcass stole across his shoulders. An ancient tribal king instead of a poor hunter, she snorted just thinking about it. As if Denny could be as great as that. Was he handsome? She didn't know. He was just Denny, the boy who'd been butting heads with her since they'd been old enough to stand. Zuni stopped beside him and searched the horizon. Though he was a head taller than she, her eyes were better, and she located his target without hesitation. Still, at first, her mind couldn't form thoughts to describe what she saw. Drawing a great breath into her chest, she watched in horror and awe. A storm, a red dust devil. None of her words fit the sight. She'd experienced sandstorms. She'd been caught in one once when she was a child and almost choked to death. But this was not like anything she'd seen before. She needed the more poetic powers of their foremothers and fathers, the ones who had composed songs they still sang at night around their fire. This red beast was no storm. A normal whirlwind made of dust and dirt had shape like a nest of angry wasps, round and rotating, flexing and shifting. But there was more to it. This thing had tendrils, arms, appendages that reached outward, skyward, and beckoned at them. Her mind, she knew, was playing tricks on her. The dust devil looked as if it had a wind-whipped face, blurred and smeared in the lines of its rotating layers. It roared like a creature from her worst dreams. Even from this distance, she could tell it was enormous. Not like a storm front, but more like a maligna, an evil spirit trying to climb its way into the heavens, trying to gain its everlasting immortality by jumping into the stars. Counting, she tracked its size and movement as it swayed toward them, looming in its enormity. When she reached the number 5, she and Denny exchanged worried glances. Without a word, They broke into a run in the direction of the rocks that sheltered their home. In the desert, one did not stop to ponder the majesty of the unknown. Even Zuni had learned, despite her stubborn mind, that the unknown could kill her. Their sandaled feet hit the red dirt in quick, even steps, and their long, bony legs stretched to span the distance. They could hear the howl of the storm now, and she knew they would not reach shelter in time. Compared to it, they were nothing but ants on the ground. Passing the first blackened tree, she felt the sting of sand on the backs of her arms and neck, her legs too. Though the deadwood painted a zigzag, dotted line, they ran straight ahead. The howl in her ears became a roar as they ran on. Soon they wouldn't be able to hear each other or breathe. Still, Zuni didn't panic. It wasn't her nature to do so. The desert had birthed her. She had been fed by its wild winds and hot sun, and if she were meant to die this day, the desert would take her back. All she could do was try as best as she could to extend this day, this moment, as if it were her last. She did spare a moment to feel sorry for her sister Lena, though, who would be left in charge. "Run faster," she demanded, quicker than the wind. Her long legs had caught up to his. She glared at him as if this whole situation were his fault. "All right," Dooney said, picking up his pace. "I'll run faster, but I'm not dropping this goat." That's chapter 1 of my new book. I hope if you get it, you enjoy it. Leave me a comment, of course. And that's all. Happy Halloween. And I'll give you a little glimpse of my buddy and my office mate, Max. Say hi. All right. Bye. Have a good day.